The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 11th Day. That's how, estimated Dr. Sentinel, the kingdom of Tartessos disappeared forever. The General Barker represented again the myth of the Agiv Perseus cutting the head of Medusa, and also the one of Heracles Mackay, defeating the triple population of the Rheans. Nevertheless, even though from Tartessos not remained stone over stone, the sacred forest was reduced to ashes, and the sculpture of Pyrene was demolished by order of Halmika Barker, the Gelm's prophecy was not fulfilled, because the stone of Venus, the unique eye of the Rheas, couldn't be stolen by Boreant Bishar. That demonstrates that even though it is true that the mystical arguments can be developed many times over the earth, their repetition is not always identical, and even they can produce more than one surprise for who has propitiated them. In this opportunity not only failed the prophecy, when the wise sword remained safe, but the extermination sentence that was over the house of Tharsis neither could be accomplished. In the Agiv myth, when Perseus nailed the sickle on Medusa's neck, from the wound born two extraordinary beings, Chrysa and Pegasus. According to the myth, only Poseidon, the king of the Atlantis and god of the Occidental Sea, dared to love Medusa, with whom begets two sons, Chrysa and Pegasus, who were born from the wound infringed by Perseus. Chrysa would be a giant destined to marry with Calliope, a daughter of Aeschylus, from whose union would born a triple giant Rhean. I believe, Dr. Sentinel, that the last manifestation of the myth, concretized in the tragedy of Tartessos, would determine its repetition until its minor details, although not complying, happily, with the prophecy of the Gelms. I believe, for example, that effectively, from the dissected neck of Medusa, from the ruins of Tartessos, borns Chrysa, the giant son of Poseidon. He was, undoubtedly, Leto de Tharsis, who, as will be seen later, wedded with a daughter of the sea, a princess of America, the other of the Occidental Sea. Chrysa would born armed with a golden sword, just as Leto de Tharsis, who would depart to America, carrying the wise sword of the Iberian kings. And I also believe that Pegasus is my son, Noio, who was born with wings to fly up to the abodes of the liberator gods, and he has the power to open the founts with his strikes, just that in his case, it treats about the founts of the wisdom. The survivors of the house of Tharsis, curiously 18, were gathered near to the secret cave, in a narrow terrace naturally protected with huge rocks which allowed certain defense and whence could be dominated the hillside of the mountain range. The saga tells that one moment before, the men of stone, the only ones who knew how to enter, have sustained a council in the secret cave. Before the disaster that was coming against the house of Tharsis, they swore to dedicate all the efforts to give fulfillment to the familiar mission and save the wise sword. Was necessary for the lineage to continue existing at any cost. And concerning to the wise sword, they decided that, after the death of the last Rheas, would remain perpetually deposited in the secret cave, at least until the day when other, man of stone, offspring of the house of Tharsis, would be able to see in it the lithic sign of Katraba, and to know that they should go. Until that occasion the wise sword would not see the light of day. When they left, they communicated these determinations to their relatives and required news about the realm. But the news that reached to the improvised refuge was strange and contradictory. It should be discarded a prompt help of the Romans due to the Gelms, had rebelled against them all the populations of the Gaul, cutting off the path to Spain. The rescue of Tartessos demanded now a very numerous expedition, which would leave unprotected the own Rome. On the other hand, in Tartessos, the Carthaginian victory had been overwhelming. All Tartessos was in power of the General Barker, what completed the total occupation of the south of Spain. To the lords of Tharsis only remained there lives in a battalion of loyal and brave royal guards. However, something strange and contradictory happened. Hamilcar Barker, it is true, annihilated Tartessos down, to convert it in debris. In this action both he and the mercenary army acted moved by an homicidal fury which surpassed every reasoning, by an indomitable force that possessed them and did not abandon them until they destroyed completely the already occupied city. It was as if the hate experimented for centuries by the Gellams against the house of Tharsis would have been accumulated in some obscure recipient, perhaps in the myth of Perseus, to release it all together in a Carthaginian soul. Nevertheless, after consummated the original destruction, the General Barca, and the military chiefs who accompanied he recovered abruptly their lucidity, not being apart from this phenomenon the death of the 20 Gellams and the departure of Beret and Bishar. Momentarily, something was interrupted, something that impulsed General Barca to desire the annihilation of the house of Tharsis. And there were no Gellams in Tartessos anymore to restart it. Thereby, free for the moment of destructive passion of the Agiv Perseus, Halmika Barca worked with the reasonableness of an authentic Carthaginian, that is to say, he thought in his personal interests. For Halmika Barca, the enemy was not only in Rome. There, in any case, was the enemy of Carthage. But in Carthage were also the enemies of Halmika Barca, who envied his career of successful general and distrusted of his power. Those who had sent him 8 years before to conquer such inhospitable country and had no intentions to make him return. But Halmika Barca would pay them with the same coin, he would demonstrate to the government of Carthage the same indifference and would usufruct in his family and own advantage the immense conquered territory. Spain would be the particular Barca's estate. But, for it, would be necessary to count with the indispensable collaboration of the native population, who had ruled until that moment the country and knew all the mechanisms of its operation. And such bellicose countries, who were free for centuries, would not easily submit to the slavery. This was clearly adverted by the Barcas, at least that their own kings and lords would convince them that it was better to not resist the occupation. The solution would not be impossible due to, according to the particular philosophy of the Carthaginians, only would need to be destroyed, the one who could not be bought. The strange and contradictory news reached then to the refuge of the lords of Tharsis. Halmika Barca would offer them to save their lives if they renounced to every right over Tartessos and accepted to enter at his service to govern the country. On the contrary case, would be exterminated as the Gellams claimed. With so much pain, but without possible alternatives, the lords of Tharsis had to accept such dishonorable offer. They made it for a superior interest, for the familiar mission and the wise sword. Once arranged the surrender, Tharsis passed to serve the Barcas, and they were occupied in to pacify Tartessos and reorganize the agricultural and industrial production. Due to the demonstrated good disposition, they were rewarded with a farm located very near from the emplacement of the disappeared Tartessos, where would live since then the Tharsis family, except for the members that performed functions in the cities or accompanied the Barcas in the inspection journeys. While the Carthaginian occupation lasted, nonetheless the protection assured by the Barcas, the tranquility was scarce, due to the Gellams, were constantly spying, who explored inch by inch seeking for the wise sword, and had added now the death of 20 of them to the list of pending charges to pay off by the house of Tharsis. At the death of Halmika Barca, in 228 before Christ, he is succeeded by his son, Hasdrubal Barca, but, after his assassination in 220 before Christ, Hannibal Barca assumes the command of the Carthaginian army. The nephew of Halmika invaded the Greek colony of Sagunt in the year 219 before Christ, which was under the protection of Rome, and started with this action the Second Punic War, that would end in 201 before Christ, with the unconditional capitulation of Carthage. 30 years after the destruction of Tartessos, Spain was free forever from the Carthaginian invader. But it was too late for Tartessos. The new Roman occupant would not abandon the peninsula until the dismemberment of his own empire, 700 years later. With the Romans, the House of Tarsus had a relative good time because it was considered an elite nobility and their government functions of the region were restored, now a Roman province, subjected to the law of the Republic and to the authority of a proconsul or praetor. The region of the ancient Tartessos, between the rivers Tinta and Odile, remained included in the province of BELICENA, denominated with this name for the river Bataise, today Guadalquivir, which was extended up to the river Ranaz, today Guadalquivir, frontier of Lusitania. Romans gave to the Tartessians the name of Turdetani. In a few decades the Turdetani was Romanized, the use of Latin was popularized, and great rural states were constructed, properties of the governors of each province, magistrates, or army chiefs. In the 1st century before Christ, the House of Tarsus had been related with the Roman nobility and was quite powerful in the Baetica, a province that counted with 175 cities, many of them rich and forceful as Cordova, Gades, Cadiz, Hispales, Seville, or Malaga. Over the base of the estate given by the Carthaginian, and the restitutions made by the Romans, the lords of Tarsus developed a rustic Roman village, building a lordly residence and widening it with the acquisition of huge extensions of fields for cultivation. Cereals, olive, grapevine, integrated the main production, apart from some minerals that were still exploited in the mountain range of Katacha. It must be clarified that the Roman Carthage named it as the village of Tudes, while the Roman Empire governed, although I will continue mentioning lords of Tarsus to maintain the continuity of the narration. As all the landowners' families Roman Hispanic possessed a dwelling in the city where they remained most part of the year. However, if they could, they always preferred to retire to the camp of Striland, because their major interest was to be near to the secret cave. The Gellams had no chance to influence over the Roman population and their power was conserved intact only in Lusitania, in some regions of the Gaul, in Britain and Hibernia. After the campaigns of Julius Caesar, this power seemed to decrease completely and, for some time, was believed that the threat was definitely conjured. This, as was seen, was an error of appreciation, a new underestimation with respect to the capacity of the Gellams to carry out their plans. In regard to the cult of the cold fire, the lords of Tarsus had no problems to reimplant it, because Romans were notably tolerable in religious matters and, they also worshipped the fire, since remote ages. In the village of Tarsus, they constructed a lararium, dedicated to Vesta, the Roman goddess of fire, and home. There, before the statue of the goddess Vesta Pyrrhina, burnt the perennial lamp of the home, the flammaria, that should never be off. Even being now a private cult, the House of Tarsus had not lost their mystical and thaumaturge fame, and soon their village became another place of pilgrimage for the seekers of the spirit, without reaching, naturally, the proportions of the age of Tartessos. The family gave to Rome good functionaries and soldiers, apart from the contribution of food and mineral production, but also provided Rome of hair aspects, augurs and vestals.